Greetings, friends! Welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we look at movies we love, break them apart, to find out what gives them their magic. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, joined again by my time travel companions and co-hosts, Mike Cloud and Kevin Weinmann. Welcome back, guys.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, guys. Again, we are traveling our way through time with the Back to the Future trilogy. Tonight, we are covering Back to the Future 3. So, if you haven't, go back and re-download Back to the Future 1 and 2, please. For those of you who have, thank you. Enjoy the rest of our fan pick month. We got some good movies coming out again. As always, take a second, leave us a rating and review, especially if you find the show on Apple Podcasts. That helps us out enormously. You can email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. Let us know other movies you'd like to hear covered. We promise we'll get to them eventually. And follow the YouTube channel. That's Nerd Alchemist, plural, with an S at the end. All right, guys. We did the past. We did the future and the past. Now we're doing the Old West, right? Back to the Future 3, maybe one of the biggest zags in trilogy history, taking us back to the Old West. So, when we last left off, the Doc and Marty had successfully escaped 1950 again. Well, that's not true. They had escaped for the first time again. Doc is struck by lightning and sent back to the Wild West for unknown reasons, like I said, canonizing the godlike villainy of time itself, sending him back to the Wild West. Marty comes running back up to Doc, and this is where we start again. Things are, as Mike says in the last two shows, every time they figure something else horrible happens. But let's just start off the conversation. Part 3, I feel like, is not nearly as beloved as the rest. People look at it as the redheaded stepchild of the trilogy. I'm not going to lie. I felt that way myself for a long time. This time viewing it, though, I found some things in it that I really adored, and I think it's such a lovely send-off to this trilogy. How did you guys feel? What are your initial thoughts on Back to the Future 3?
I'm still one of those people that's like, considering trilogies in general and how terrible third movies tend to be, this is still pretty good. It's still pretty good comparatively to like most trilogies. I'll say I enjoyed it. It's just, I'd say kind of more of like I don't hate it. It just might have more of a minor letdown, I'd say. And that's maybe just my lizard brain talking, where I'm like, what? There's no like, really cool futuristic stuff and hoverboards and holograms and shit.
There is a hoverboard. How dare you?
There is a hoverboard. There is
a souped-out DeLorean. How dare you? There's future shit everywhere in this movie.
Again, I watched it. I enjoyed it. It's my least favorite of all the movies, but I still like it. It's enjoyable.
That's the phrase.
It does have one of my favorite intros, though. I love the first 10 minutes when Doc Brown is just freaking the fuck out and just refuses to believe that Marty has again come back from the future.
What you said is actually the thing. I think people use that line a lot. It's the worst of the Back to the Future movies, as if that's a slam.
Right.
Back to the Future 1 and 2 are in the pantheon of great movies. The fact that the third one isn't quite as good as the other two, even if you would say Back to the Future 3 is half as good as the other two, that still makes it an amazing movie. So I don't like that argument. I dismiss that argument. Kevin, what did you think about Back to the Future 3?
My hot take is that I think it's right on par with 2. I think 2 and 3 are equally as good. And the reason being is because usually when you have a trilogy, they try extra hard in that third movie to keep it in line with the other two movies. And by that time, it's lost its magique. I think that there's a lot of things that you need to be able to do in a third to not only keep it fresh, but you have to be able to go and keep people interested. And they picked a perfect genre. You can't write in. The reason why people love the two movies is because you've got the romantic 1950s along with the cool 1980s at that point. People loved that dichotomy. So you can't remove yourself too far from either one of those and still keep the story centralized, because those people still have to exist in some sort of family matter, right? And so the fact that you go back to the Old West, I felt like such an idiot watching the second one and looking at all of the drops that they had for the third one. I just wasn't even thinking about it. And I was like, look at, oh my God,
Yes.
they've got all the people and they're lining it up for the third story. And I just didn't tie it together. So here's my takeaway from the third is that you do an incredible job of being able to see the start of each one of these people's families. You get to see how everybody was back in the olden days in a beloved genre, and they actually did a fucking good job with that genre. I felt like it was very westerny. They took some pages out of our classic westerns, any Clint Eastwood classics. And you guys will come to find that during our discussion today, I'm definitely going to be bringing up a lot of scenes that really resonate with me. So I say right on par with Back to the Future 2. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, see, what I like a lot about this, right? I think too many cappers of trilogies are so beholden to tying up all the loose threads, right? And I think what I really like about Back to the Future 3 is as we've done these kind of wild sci-fi adventures, in part 2 we do the dark, future, which I love. This is the movie where Doc and Marty finally have time to kind of stop and ponder what the fuck they've done. Like, this is what the fuck just happened? Because the other two movies essentially take place in about 2 days at absolute warp speed and everything is going apeshit. This is just like, hey man, you live in a barn now. Like, what is going on? What are the ramifications of this? Should we go? What is happening? Is it okay for me to come back and save Doc? The other thing I like is that I think this is the movie where Doc Brown truly rounds out as a character, right? I love the idea of the zany man of science that we see early on is so obsessed with doing something great that he's willing to throw the whole timeline and all of the universe, to the shredder, right? Just because he wants to achieve something that, maybe we shouldn't play with. This is the movie where Doc Brown, the man of science, finally actually finds something worth achieving, and it really actually melted my heart. I love Doc and Clara. I'm gonna go on record. I fucking love the Doc and Clara arc in this movie, and it really meant a lot to me now. I remember not giving a fuck about it as a younger viewer, but now I think it's such an important element to the movie. I think the problem people have with Back to the Future 3 is I think that there's a lot of really good quiet character moments. I think, though, there's not that one or two super iconic moments like the first two films. But I don't think that means that it's a not worthy entry to the series.
It is kind of a hard turn for Doc, though, because he was never cold and callous, but not even just Clara, but even with Marty, he is a much more emotional character in this movie, and it's something you're not really used to when you think of Doc Brown. And granted, God knows how much time has passed since he arrived in the Old West.
Right, but riddle me this, Cloud, though. Couldn't you argue that he's only nice to Marty because Marty's the one who comes back and tells him he's successful, so he's bonded to Marty, he has to be nice to Marty, keep Marty happy, and that he likes Marty because Marty helps him achieve his own personal goals. Clara literally falls into his life on this absolute lightning bolt style moment.
Well, I want to get back to that moment, but he still writes him an incredibly heartfelt letter, that brings him to tears, reading it himself down the road, and even he said I didn't even know I was capable of doing something like this.
Exactly, because future Marty tripped it up. The first thing Doc would remember is future Marty coming and saying, "Hey, I'm future boy. We got to build this machine. It worked." That's where their relationship starts. Of course you like that guy. I'll tell you a scene in this movie that I absolutely adore, right? And he saves Clara from this. We'll get to Doc being an absolute Wild West badass out of nowhere in a minute. But he saves Clara from the carriage. And he even said earlier, he's like, I'm a man of science. I don't believe in love at first sight. Fuck her. We're not going to go pick her up, right? He catches her. He pulls her onto his horse. The moment they lock eyes, I literally swooned. I was like, oh, I felt like I was elevated in my soul. I felt so happy in that moment. Unlike I have in the whole series. I love that. I love the idea of the man whose entire life is pursuits of science, these big, crazy, scary ideas. And at the end, it is just this lovely little fable moment, right? Maybe all of this was just to lead him to this one person, the only person he'll ever love. I thought that was great, man. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm getting old and soft, but that really, truly worked for me a lot in this movie.
This is the Doc movie. This isn't
this is the Doc movie.
This is the Doc movie, and I feel like you when you go and focus 2 movies worth of material towards Marty, this is kind of what you need to do with the third movie. You can't have 2 people through the majority of a series and not the other one get a part of it, a part of the series. And usually if you have a trilogy, by the time the trilogy ends, you've really looked at all the characters that are in that trilogy. And I gotta admit too, like, do we really think when we see Doc, Mary Steenburgen's a fox? Does that really happen? Are we convinced that Mary Steenburgen looks at looks at him and says, "Hey, you're a good looker"? I thought it was a sweet combination, but at the same time, I'm like, man, good on you, Doc. You really roped in a you really roped in a looker.
Well, the average guy we see throughout this movie, I was like, yeah, Doc's like comparable to that. Like in the 80s, Doc is maybe like a 5.
Guys, he's a good looking man.
Yeah, in the Old West, he has teeth,
yeah.
he shaves, he probably has some kind of like hygiene in his like giant barn. I was like, yeah, he probably is a little bit better, right?
He's a 1985 6, but an 1885 9.
That's a great point.
Hey, we could all do worse. Yeah, but then what I like too, I love every fucking scene with them, and it's weird because usually things like that are so saccharine really bother me. I don't always love the love at first sight, but in this movie, when we're dealing with these big questions, right? It's kind of nice to just take it back to, hey man, there's really one thing that moves every bit of our existence, right? Everything all of us do is to try to accrue more love, right? That's why people want to be powerful, rich, whatever. It's because that's all we want. And what we see is that Doc, that's when we met Doc, right, in the 1950s, first we meet him, he's a fucking like dog endangering terrorist, essentially. Then we go back in the 50s, and he's a guy in a giant empty house with cats trying to build a giant brainwave to detect emotions and thoughts, which tells you how fucking lonely and clueless he is. And this is the movie where we see that, all of this was worth something, man. Like, yeah, I don't know, it should have bothered me, but when they just have that moment of looking through the telescope, like those moments just really, and that's why I think the Western is such a clever addition to this. Because the first 2 movies are frenetic, right? They're just wild, high energy movies, jumping. The great thing about Western is great stillness and quiet. And what has to fill the frame if there's not all of these other things, if we're not constantly doing fast cuts? The actors have to fill that fucking frame. And I feel like they did a great job of that in this movie.
And I think that you also have to build up a reason as to why Doc is so adverse to keeping the time travel, the DeLorean around. And I think that this movie did a good job of, like, to your point, they sat around being like, Jesus Christ, like, I'm in the West. I could die tomorrow. I could be hung. Yeah. Like, I could get malaria and die tomorrow because we don't have a cure. So this is a problem that this exists. And by the way, the thing that blew my mind that I didn't think about, because I watched these all when I was a kid, was that by the time that this movie had wrapped up, I was like, these motherfuckers have only lived like 48 hours of an actual day in the 1980s at this point. Like, there's been 3 movies, and there have been like 5 loves, and there's been at least a dozen different versions of the world. And it's like, it was enough time to, like, I don't know, go to school twice or go see a couple movies. Like, it was such a short time frame. But they had to build in this idea that at the end of the day, Doc had to have a reason to make sure that time travel was impossible, and we needed to get rid of it because we saw what the ramifications were. So that's never going to play itself into being this fantabulous third movie, because that means you're still building on the idea that time travel needs to be this solver of things. Well, we've seen that it only ruins things, so we have to make sure that we put that to bed. And I think a lot of people they don't like that. They still liked this crazy idea that you could still time travel, and that wasn't the purpose of the third film.
But I think, too, to that point, though, what makes it so fascinating is they do that the whole movie. And then at the end, the climax of Doc choosing against his science mind and going back to save her, and then floating off on a hoverboard, which now exists in the Wild West. I mean, to me, that's one of those fucking poster moments, right? That's one of those. There's a guy who wrote a book called Story, right? I think his name was Robert McKee, and he talks about the art of screenwriting, whatever. And his theory, if I remember it correctly, he's like, audiences don't remember motives. They don't really remember a lot of that kind of stuff. Audiences remember the one or two big moments, right? That makes them feel an inordinate amount. And him choosing Clara and hovering off, and he's not looking at Marty. He's not looking at the train. Earlier in the movie, he said it'll be a spectacular crash if only someone was there to see it. And in that moment, all he does is look in her eyes. See, I'm getting all fucking like Visca. He looks in her eyes and just smiles. He's the happiest we've seen him in the trilogy. And to me, I'm like, that's the moment. That's the Back to the Future 3 moment that tells you everything. And the next thing we see is that now he's this, Captain Nemo on this amazing ship traveling through time with, a loving family. So he wanted to destroy the DeLorean, but then he comes full circle. It's really kind of, I thought that was poetic. I love that.
So you love it in the sense that this is like one of your favorite love stories, essentially.
I mean, that's a big part, but I mean, imagine this though. If in Return of the Jedi, they're like, let's really take the time to round out Chewbacca. You know what I mean? Like give him a lot to do so that we understand a lot more. I mean, Doc Brown essentially was a mover of the plot in the first, and a very fucking good one that we love because he's our zany friend. But, he's like a Kramer on Seinfeld. He pops in to do a bit. We don't really latch on an enormous amount. This is and the moment I knew is when they go to the town square, right? We have our famous town square scene, which we have in all 3 movies. And in this one, Marty's actually getting fucking dragged by a horse. He's wildly uncool showing up in his dime store cowboy outfit. Everyone's fucking with him. And Doc Brown just strolls in like a motherfucking badass, shoots down the rope and stands. And you're like, oh, man, Doc Brown just stole this movie. This is Doc Brown's fucking movie right now.
That sniper rifle is iconic in this movie. Like,
it's an awesome scene.
It's only on screen for, probably like 20 seconds. But you remember that rifle.
I just remember that scene because you're like, wait, so Doc Brown now is like, he turns into Kurt Russell from Tombstone. You're like, what just happened? Like, that's our first time seeing Doc Brown, and I just remember being like, huh? What? This is awesome.
Yeah, Doc is over here being able to shoot the wings off a fly, where Marty's basically creating the first golf. What is it called? Frisbee golf group.
Yeah. Ultimate Frizz, bro.
That's not cool at all, bro.
Because he is probably the smartest man in the world at that point in time.
He's the second smartest man in the world, Marty McFly.
No, but Doc.
Oh, Doc Brown is definitely the smartest man in the world at that time.
Yeah, Doc, and that's actually what makes him a badass in that time. So that's kind of a cool aspect of the character. He's not big and tough and, just guns blazing or like muscle bound. He's just a super smart guy, and that makes him incredibly powerful in that time.
Yeah, and it's cool. Like, even the scene at the dance, right? When he's like, we see Doc Brown's ready to literally fist fight 4 guys for the honor of Clara. This is a new Doc Brown, man.
So I have to pivot just real quick. Is this our favorite version of Biff Tannen?
No. I'm still Pleasure Paradise to Biff Tannen for me. I like the Donald Trump Biff, which is weird. I feel like that would be less interesting now.
I am 100% on board with Old West Biff Tannen. I love it. Because I feel like he looked the way that he should be personified, which is just shitty, terrible, grizzled bad teeth looking mofo with his lackeys again. Like I felt like it was a great way to go and bring on board what I thought he really was in the other two movies. And on top of that, this was kind of like I guess the most. It's a weird way of saying this, but not to say he was intimidating, but this felt villainous to me. This felt like really villainous right from the get-go, that he played the part well.
He was the scariest Biff. I'll say that just because he was a loose cannon. And none of the other Biffs would.
Well, they added a good thing too. Yeah, because they added the Biff who gets emotionally overwhelmed and cries. Right? Like when he gets made fun of at the dance, you see him tear up and you're like, I now see the origin of this psychological trauma that takes us all the way to Pleasure Palace, Biff. Because in the Wild West, you can never be tough enough. No. You know, and I thought that was a great addition. The fact that they said, hey, at the town square, maybe cry a little. That's just one of those, like, like to Kevin's point, you totally understand this character. And you're making a small choice that a lot of people will miss, but when you see it, it adds everything to that character. Because even in Back to the Future 2, they show us Wild West murdering gunslinger Biff Mad Dog Tannen, right? And you're like, oh, that's how they've shaped their family narrative. You go back and see this guy is really struggling with a lot of things. I thought it was great, man.
Compensating for their own insecurities.
Yeah. But that essentially was the entire theory of the Wild West.
That's essentially every.
You have to kill everything at all times because everything's trying to kill you.
I think he really would have benefited from having his own psychiatrist at that point.
Yeah, right.
You know, someone to talk to, someone to unload his problems to.
He needed a doc. I don't know what the macho bully version of Doc is, but he needed to find a doc, right? Marty found Doc and it helped him.
Yeah.
He needed to find a doc.
1,000%.
You know who could have been his doc is Marshall Strickland.
What's that?
Marshall Strickland could have been Biff's doc.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Marshall Strickland's cameo in this is so fucking good. I loved it.
Totally agree.
Dude, all you need to do is just get one more time travel, get Billy Crystal, throw him in the time machine, and just have him partner up.
You're going to City Slickers Back to the Future 3?
City Slickers / analyze this / Back to the Future 4.
So gotcha. So what you're doing is a multiplicity of Billy Crystals to City Slicker Biff. This is like really in-depth movie metaing.
I think that one of the things that the other movies did was that Biff was just an asshole and a bully, but it was like the first time that we really ran into him, he straight up was going to murder Marty. Like,
oh yeah, I mean Marty was lynched. Marty was hanging right there.
Which, by the way, half-ass internet research on this one, he did pass out. Like there was a malfunction with. Yeah, there was a malfunction with the noose and the contraption that was having him hanging, and he absolutely passed out during that. I don't want to say almost died, but I guess if you're going to pass out, that's probably close to dying.
Well, yeah, if you pass out, you're probably like close.
Yeah,
Jesus Christ.
They didn't have much time to get him back down. He may have
no.
Michael J. Fox.
So I mean, if we go back to the first one, Marty was never in. Marty being close to death had nothing to really do with Biff because he was more of a bully, and Biff's goal wasn't to kill him. In the second one, Biff definitely was killing him. Yeah. He had a gun; he was going to shoot him.
Oh yeah.
In this, but it was a lead up. It was a lead up. He knew Marty and raised Marty at this point, so it was kind of a build. This was just straight up. I'm taking you and I'm going to lynch you, and I think that escalated the hatred of Biff so much more in this one as Mad Dog, and I guess that's why I don't know why my hatred means I like him more, but I just like this character. I liked this version of Biff probably more than any other. But
you said it in part 2. Biff is the wildly underappreciated part of this series. Like this series does not work to me without Biff. He's an integral part of how great this series is.
I don't think it works without anybody except for Jennifer. Jennifer is the only non-essential character.
You're still
They
fucking...
literally switched the goddamn person that played her. Yeah.
Yeah, God damn it, Cloud. Leave Jennifer in the trash like Marty and Doc did. Leave her alone. Some things
Put her
happened.
on the porch.
Yeah.
By the way, are we a little bit unnerved that Marty in his old version is absolutely railing his mother in the old version as Leah Thompson? Like, I feel like that is a little bit concerning that they are definitely knocking boots and they are...
This falls into my time as a vindictive God theory. Right? It's like, every time Marty wakes up somewhere, there's a, hey, you should or want to fuck your mom moment. Right? The last one, it was the fake tits and whatever, right? Where he's just like, ah! This one, he shows up and sees a ginger version of himself fucking an Old West version of himself. I mean, he doesn't literally see the fucking, but you get the gist. There's a baby. Yeah, that didn't happen on accident. And it is appalling that Marty must keep facing this. And it is the one thing that he's taking with him back to 1985. You can reset timelines all you want. Marty is always going to see his mom as the girl that wanted to J.O. him in the car, the girl with the fake tits, the girl that was riding him like a cowgirl. Like, Marty will always see his mom that way no matter how many timelines compile. That is why time is like, stop it. Stop it.
It's a little bit problematic.
Becomes a fuck up in the future. The car accident has nothing to do with it. It's just that deep Oedipus complex that he is struggling
well, he
with.
only wants to drive so fast to run away from these horrific memories of his mom as a sex object.
Griffey, we also have to build a reason as to why Marty wants the time machine to explode, and I think that pretty much nails it when you've gone back in time 3 different times, and that's what the world is trying to tell you.
That's the time.
I was going to ask you guys about this. We talked about it briefly at the end of episode 2 podcast. I'm still finding it weird that time sent them to this spot, right? I love that this movie gets into the kind of fantasy version of this, which is we go back to the actual dedication of the clock, right? Which becomes this symbol for the whole series and remains in every future we ever see the clock exist. And it's kind of a Doctor Who bit, right? Which Doctor Who already existed in the world by the time. That Doc was supposed to go back to meet Clara at the dedication of the clock in this one point that has become a confluence of all of time and space, right? So that then him and his wife and his 2 sons that we see at the end of the movie can go around possibly correcting timelines. Like this movie, the end of this trilogy is kind of a, hey, we are going to be the American version of Doctor Who.
Yeah, once you get like to the end, that's kind of like one thing where it does, pun unintended, kind of goes off the rails.
Oh yeah! Don't say pun intended when it's that good. Leave that shit there.
Oh, Mike froze.
He'll pop on.
He'll get there soon. He's really making this point right now.
Andy's touching his face, which he told me I shouldn't be doing.
I'm frozen.
Yeah, there you go.
You are.
All right, so make your point. Just start again.
Make it a point again.
Face toucher.
It's kind of in line and not in line at the same time, where Doc is constantly saying, I wish I had never invented that damn time machine. We shouldn't do it. We need to destroy it as soon as possible. And every chance they try and get to destroy it, then something else goes wrong that they need it. So when they finally don't actually need it anymore and things are good, he's like, you know what? I'm going to create a time machine.
Well, he didn't know he had designed. He thought the DeLorean was a time machine, not a pussy wagon. That's the difference. At the end, he's like, oh, damn. What?
But, you want to try like fantasy theories. Like one thing I was thinking about is like maybe like Doc Brown is like some kind of like time god. Because he's...
Well, no, I think the god of time has chosen him, right?
Well,
him and Clara and Jules and Verne, who are going to become some kind of weird Damien-style geniuses, right? Maybe not Damien. That's probably the worst of the children to compare him to. But you know what I mean? Like, you think they're just going to show up places and not handle? Like, they are now time operatives.
Well, I was just thinking, like, maybe the whole thing of, like, Doc's frustration with the time was all just an act. Taking Marty along for the ride, and then once all that was set and done, he's like, you know what, time to do a new time machine and go off and do something else. Like,
I don't agree with that. I think he legitimately, because one of the better scenes in the movie, to me, if we're doing Kevin's what's your favorite moment, right? The scene when Doc realizes he can't bring Clara, right? He has to not do it. And he stays up at the campfire and he's like, I gotta go at least say goodbye to her, right? And he goes and he tells her the truth, right? The first time he's told anyone this kind of like, hey, I'm a time traveler now. Maybe the first time he said that out loud about himself, and he's like, this fucking sucks, right? Because Doc's had a lot more adventures in other timelines than any other character we've seen. He tells her that, and she slams the door in her face, and she cries, and there's just this heartbreaking moment where after she slams the door, he goes, but it's true. And then we see him go to the bar, and I was like, that, to me, I don't think it's an act, right? I think he really, truly hates the time machine in that moment. Because imagine, I think at that moment, and all the way up until he doesn't, Doc truly thinks he's leaving the one thing in any time or space that will ever matter to him.
Yeah.
And I think he's willing to do it until fate and or time and or God itself brings her to him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I thought that moment of Doc just like, but it's true, absolute heartbreaker. Like that was one of my favorite moments of Doc in all the movies. Loved it.
Yeah, and we kind of have to go back to the fact that, like, because this is Doc's movie, he needed to have that moment. We've already removed the fact that Jennifer doesn't fucking matter at this point.
Poor Jennifer.
And so, poor Jennifer. I love Elizabeth Shue, but we can't bring her into this film. But I think that, like, the way that he becomes so attached so quickly. By the way, I'm not going to fault this movie for being a Disney movie. I can't fault it for the fact that they fell in love within 48 hours. I get it. Like, you have to move the narrative along. But it's like, I thought it was kind of sweet that and by the way, I have to think of it this way too, that back in those days, you did have to fall in love pretty quickly, because you definitely could have died just from things in the
average
world.
life's like
and
42.
So, like, yeah, just snatch onto it as quickly as possible. So I think I enjoyed that part of it, but if there was a thing that I think that I missed from that relationship, is just that I don't know, maybe a couple of extra days, maybe a couple of extra moments. There was obviously they hung out at the dance the very first time that they met. If there had been a little bit of like a Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid montage of them, you know, going through the fields or whatever, I think it probably would have been a little bit more up my alley. But it still was great, and I still appreciate that relationship, and I thought it was a really good relationship. Do we think that when it comes to Marty in this film, that he was underutilized, properly utilized? Like, what was the Marty story in all this?
I think Marty, for the first time in the series, realizes he's a bit at the mercy of Doc. Because in all the other movies, he's truly at the mercy of Doc fixing the time machine. But he has other missions. This is the one where he truly has no real mission, right? So this is Marty's time to sit and reflect on who he is, what he's been doing. And this is where we get the chance for him to try to learn the lesson of, hey, you're fucking hating the word chicken or yellow could get you. So he does have a nice little mission, right? Well, I mean, granted, he's not falling in love or knocking boots with Clara after the barn, which definitely is the extra montage we were missing, right? The before sunrise moment with them just like talking, like reading Jules Verne to each other in the buff. But I think Marty has a fine. Marty's kind of relegated to being Doc. He has one important thing to do or learn.
You know, because he's kind of. Yeah, they do have a little bit of switch.
Now he's touching his face again and picking his nose.
I appreciate the fact that his video camera is actually waiting until the moment to show him where he gets COVID. So we keep.
Right. I'll send him this video when it's over. Here's Mike's COVID moments.
So I did enjoy, obviously Marty's integral to the entire story, but the fact that they kind of made his story not important to the timeline or not, that his narrative wasn't the most important part was kind of great, because he taking a back seat means that he can do more of the bit stuff in the first place. I cannot stress enough how much I love the first moment that they go back to the Old West. Like, I love that they have this scene of in an old drive-in movie theater, and that he drives through it, and it immediately is a Cowboys and Indians moment and he's stuck in the middle of it. And then there's the bear, and then there's like him getting his shoes, not having his shoes there. Like, how they built on 10 minutes worth of a scene was fantastic, and how they immediately made him a fish out of water. That really painted the narrative for the rest of the movie of this weird dude named Clint Eastwood kind of moseying into this town. I really loved how they introduced him. I don't know whether or not you guys felt like when he went back into that period, whether or not that was kind of like a fun transition, or if you were like put off because it's like, I hate the Old West. I mean, what were your thoughts?
You bring up one thing that was like interesting though, the shoes, where they make this like point. You guys can hear me now, right?
Yeah.
All right, where they make this point of, you can't wear those out there. You got to wear these boots. You know, people will call you out. And then he gets chased by the bear and drops the boots to distract the bear and wanders into town. And nobody says a damn thing about his shoes. Like, it's never a part.
No, Biff does. He goes, "What's Nikkei mean?"
Oh, that's right. He does.
They do mock him, but it's not like a, "Hey, what the fuck are those?" He's more mad about the brand. If he had chosen Reebok, they would have been fine.
I'm pretty sure he would have been fucked no matter what. I mean, that outfit definitely called for ridicule at that point.
Yeah.
I think it's weird that people of that time were so into their fashion palettes. I would have thought they wouldn't have cared as much.
Yeah.
He's just like, "Hey, this was the only thing to kill by me, and I made a shirt out of it." They'd be like, "I totally understand," but not. No, I think one of the things too is by this movie somewhat reduces Marty down to the kind. In a way, they're just doing the Clint Eastwood with him, right? A lot of those old Clint Eastwood movies, we don't spend a lot of time getting to follow his emotional journey, right? He just shows up at this two-dimensional stoic gunslinger. And that's what Marty becomes to these people, and by proxy us in a little way. I mean, we see some extra stuff that makes him not, they never figure out like why he's so good at shooting and Doc is so good at, I think again this falls into my fantasy theory. Also, like, why none of the cavalry or Native Americans were like, "Hey, what the fuck is that fell in the middle of our chase?" Right? Like, they just kind of keep going about as if this is all some kind of clever, life as a stage moment. But yeah, I like that he becomes this kind of just Clint Eastwood figure, right? He's just there for one showdown, one duel. But and I think it works.
They do talk about why he's a good gunslinger in the second movie, because he's really good at that arcade game.
The game, that's right. And it's actually shooting Old West bad guys. Oh, yeah, you're right.
They got it all back, my friend.
They had it all there.
The chest plate. Like, Biff is watching that Clint Eastwood movie with the chest plate.
And also, that's a throwback to part one where, thank God no bad guys ever aim for your face. Right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because, like, Doc, the Libyans have machine guns, so, like, in theory of them, like, winging him in the face is much higher. I guess in a duel you would aim for the heart, so that works, but...
I thought we were going to get to this later in the conversation, but this is why I love it. This movie's so much fun, is that you watch the second one and you're like, motherfuck. Of course, that was the moment. Like, they're watching Clint Eastwood get shot and he goes and uses it and throws it away. Like, I love that fucking moment. I thought that was
Clint
so much
Eastwood
fun.
was on the TV.
Yes.
That exact moment was on. Oh, man, yeah. See, I had forgot. I even posted that shit on Twitter and I forgot about it.
Yeah, there's so much planted in the second movie.
I have one issue with the duel, though. I have one issue with the duel, which is I thought this was our moment for Marty to finally learn the don't take the bait about being yellow, right? Which he does in a way. He's like, he's an asshole. I don't care. He grabs Doc and tries to escape out the back, and then we still force him right back into the duel. I was like, he made his choice.
Well, he does lose. He does learn this. He does learn it.
He does leave, but then to pull him right back in, I was like, oh.
No. I meant like with the car. at the end. He
no. Right. There's a double. I'm saying I thought watching it that was our moment, and I thought they undercut it a bit. And then come to find out it is the car. His way of getting out of the car race, I'm like, don't drive. Don't slam in reverse at full speed. That's also not good. Now he's hit another Rolls Royce and caused another timeline meltdown. But yeah, it was, I don't know. I thought the duel was cool, man. And this was him actually finally getting to pummel the shit out of Biff. We saw George knock him out. You know, we saw him like fighting with him. This is when he finally gets to all the way take it to Biff.
We have to appreciate the fact that the casting is so perfect because Michael J. Fox is the only guy that could be standing at like 5'3" and 5'4" that you could actually see him take on a guy the size of Biff because he's got this moxie to him that a lot of guys his size don't necessarily have, or they don't seem like, especially his build. He's pretty slim, but it's like you don't doubt for a second that dude's not like fucking. You know what? It reminds me of like the old Punch-Out game. Like this dude, like the little Punch-Out guy, like punching up his weight, man.
Yeah. Well, the old really Punch-Out game for Super Nintendo is like you fight an old man, and the next guy you fight is like 7 feet tall and 500 pounds and wearing overalls, and you're like, wow, we're stepping it up a notch.
So there was a moment, and I love when he hits him with the plate that was on his chest. That was great too. And then he falls in manure. I mean, it was just
manure after manure. But that was one thing I wondered. I was hoping to see something in the future timeline of Biff. We see he's still a car waxer, right? But I was wondering if that was going to change it more than that, right? That maybe Biff had become some kind of decent person because he had gotten knocked into the shit all those years ago. So maybe Biff's timeline would have been altered as well.
50s Biff, an even big dick that needed to be knocked out and put in his place. And still, old man Biff is still a dick and has a dick grandson.
That's true. That's true.
I
don't know if it would have been cathartic or not to see Biff like come out the other side and be okay.
Hey, by the way, do we really think that they could have gotten, not to completely pivot the conversation, could they have gotten a train up to 88 fucking miles an hour? Like when they were doing that again, I was like, I don't know whether or not you like, does that exist? Like
I don't know.
I mean, in Japan, not in the Old West.
I don't know if the mechanics of a train would have held, even if you had enough power to push it to 80 miles per hour. Like that thing would have fallen apart.
Or is this again the hand of the god of time coming in and pushing that fucking train exactly where we need?
It's amazing.
I was wondering, like, one thing I missed, I may not be remembering, that bothered me too, is okay. So Marty, they have to push the car because Marty ripped the fuel line, so they have to push it.
And then they blew it out with booze. They blew out the whole manifold.
Well, what happened to the car that Doc Brown got shot back in time with?
That is the DeLorean.
No, okay, so the DeLorean that Doc Brown went back in time would still be there when Marty went back to get him.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what they talked about because it was buried in the mine.
He can't, well.
Or did they mention that that's what he was taking apart for parts for, but then he would have the parts. Yeah, I guess maybe that's just a miss.
I don't know. Like I was always under the impression that was because Marty uses it in the future, like it.
Right. There would be two DeLoreans there.
There's technically could be two DeLoreans.
Yeah. Interesting.
So yeah, like what happened to the other DeLorean? Because that would have made things way easier.
Well, maybe Doc is too clouded by love. He's not supposed to have all this extra stuff. Maybe Doc doesn't want to go back as much.
Oversight there, Doc.
I'm going to Reddit.
Yeah, Reddit will have some fucking insane theory.
All right, when Marty goes back in time using the DeLorean, Doc leaves him to create a situation where Marty has to come to the DeLorean that is currently sitting in the mine in 1883. I've always wondered what Doc did with the gas. Well, that's dumb. What Doc did with the gasoline that was in the DeLorean sitting in the mine. It's way more complicated in that there are several points throughout the series when there are between 2 to 4 DeLoreans in the same time. Jesus. Just to give you guys a heads up, this goes on for a while. I'm not going to go down it. Basically, if you want to go and have your
But you can imagine, like, when old man Biff goes back, and then they go back also, you're like, that is so many DeLoreans in the 1950s. Like, they're hiding them everywhere.
That's why I love, like, Rick and Morty, like, kind of like having, like, a strong parallel to Back to the Future, where they always talk about, like, we're not doing time. We're not doing time. It's stupid. We'll do parallel dimensions, but we're not doing time. And, like, the one time that they do time, it's, like, utter chaos because it's just this of things in a single time because people keep going back and back and back and back to try and change that exact moment that something was changed.
Yeah, right?
So there would be, like, infinite DeLoreans.
But that's what I like about this movie is we kind of stop and just take a breath. And it's just nice to spend time with the characters where they're not. They still have things to accomplish, but it's just a slower tale of these two men figuring out their own shit, right? They're not necessarily grappling with the consequences of time travel in this movie. They're grappling with their own inner issues, right? And I thought, I don't know, that really works for me.
Allows you to get, I appreciate it, but when you. And I may be just being a dick here, but it kind of gets you kind of lost in the forest for the trees. That when you do get distracted from those finer points when you start like a movie that's about time travel. When you think about,
well, here's the question: Did it really distract you when you were watching it, or does it only distract you when it's over and you're just left to think about it more and more? Like, does it ruin the experience? Because you're like, there has to be a second DeLorean here. No, I don't think so.
I mean, that was one of the best things that Bob did as a writer was that he didn't get stuck in the minutia of time travel. Otherwise,
you absolutely can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the Cloud's Rick and Morty point. It's like you cannot get caught on those things, or you will never make them. Just them existing and him having blacksmithed and him having made an ice cube machine in the Old West. Even when they leave, someone's going to find that barn and be like, what is this? And that will irrevocably alter everything, right? So you cannot let yourself get caught up in those moments. Think of time as a god that defends and controls itself. That answers some of these things.
If leaving an almanac in the wrong hands means that Biff becomes like Donald Trump Jr., I can't imagine what a hoverboard in 1885 would do to the rest of the world. I'm pretty sure the whole world explodes at that point.
Well, let's say even without the hoverboard, if Doc and Marty leave, Biff comes back for his revenge when he gets out of jail to murder Doc Brown, and he's like, what is this contraption? And then Biff becomes like the Henry Ford of America, right? And then he's like this vastly early father of America. It's an even scarier time.
Never a wheeled vehicle. There's never a wheeled always cars.
Biff ends up ruling the world with hoverboard cowboys that have sniper rifles that he stole from Doc. I'm just saying.
Telescope lens sniper rifles, yeah, and iced tea.
And they ride in trains that have magic logs that make it go 88 miles an hour.
See, I actually think stuff like the magic logs and this and that, I think it's a direct shot at the fans. I think it's guys, have fun. Stop it. Like, just have fun. Because, again, we talked about this too. The absolute core of Back to the Future and why it's so beloved and why it's better than other movies of its ilk is because you're supposed to care about these guys, these people, right? And so if you're too busy worrying about the time travel, you're missing the thing that makes Back to the Future great.
You're right.
And I think the logs, it's literally just color-coded logs with 1, 2, 3 on them. And Doc's like, yeah, no big deal. You know? And that's the writers and directors telling us, like, chill out. We're about to be on a train. Chill out.
One moment that I thought was so funny when I was watching it was where they hooked up like six or eight horses to the DeLorean, and he just started like taking it like a stagecoach. And then whilst sitting on the DeLorean, Doc goes, horses only run like 40 miles an hour. And in my head, I'm like, if you fucking knew that going in, wouldn't you have just saved yourself the hassle of having a bunch of horses running in the general direction with it?
We definitely missed that all of the horses break their leg and Doc has to kill him with his awesome gun scene. We definitely missed that one.
Do you imagine how much work was put into that harness to adapt it to pull a DeLorean, and how much work Marty probably did? He would have to have been pissed at that moment where he's like, wait, what?
Marty at that point just like,
on,
whatever, get me out of here.
Earlier?
Yeah, I'm about to get murdered in the streets before breakfast. Like, get me the fuck out of here. Oh, that's another great scene we missed too, is when Doc is having his emotional moment. And I love that throwback to Remember July 4th, Doc. And we're like, dude, are we about to see hardcore alcoholic Doc? We've already seen him as like Tombstone Doc, horse riding expert Doc. And all, even knows that time is sending Clara in his path because the snakes spooked the horses. We're like, something bad's going on with Doc. And he's about to get hammered. And when he's just sitting there telling them about the future and they're just laughing, and Marty comes in, how many has he had? Nothing. None. He just likes to hold it. I fucking thought that was so good. Such a brilliant addition.
That was brilliant.
What is in the cocktail that he drinks to wake him up?
Oh,
yeah,
God.
it's like every spicy hot thing. The wake up juice.
There's like pickle juice, hot sauce, and I think a bar mat.
Jalapenos.
Do we think Worcestershire was in there? Maybe some
yeah,
stuff?
for sure.
Like an A1.
I remember watching that and like I never had a guttural reaction as a kid watching it. As an adult, like I can taste it.
Yeah, you're just like literal stomach aches for a week. I can't believe in college we never tried that though.
Right?
Like that feels like something one of us is guys who all lived in a house together and drank too much. One of us would have pulled that reference. But like, I wonder if that works.
how we never did wake up juice with any of us in the dorm. Like, yeah, that's a missed opportunity.
You mean, wait, what about when we lived together? Come on.
I mean, that's what I mean. Like, we needed it so bad. If that would have worked, that would have, I don't know, maybe I would have had better grades. I would have actually gone to class. Who knows?
I feel like it might have actually murdered me, though, if I had stuck a funnel in your mouth and poured that down your throat.
If I woke up non-hungover, though, I would have been cool. If I woke up hungover and full of wake-up juice, then I would have killed you. This is a no-win game, right? You have to succeed, and then we'll be cool.
I feel like we would have had to do it with like somebody like Sam.
That's true. All right, what else do we have to cover here before we wrap up with our trilogy debate?
I mean, I feel like we've done a pretty good job. I just need to I need to go back to the fact that this has one of my favorite openings again. We already acknowledged it, but it's like how it immediately goes into him freaking out and how they've got to figure out how to go and send him back is just fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I thought it was this sounds so corny, guys, but I thought it was a beautifully filmed movie. Cinematography-wise, there's great shots of the Old West. I thought it was gorgeous. It was a lot of fun to watch. I gotta wonder how in the hell that place turned into the Two Pines at some point. Like, it doesn't even look like
yeah.
I never thought of that.
That's a
it's
desert.
A full-on desert.
What the hell are you talking about? Like,
I thought about
there
is a scene with pine trees. I did think about that, but there is in the background. They have like 8
cool,
pine trees.
like 5.
Yeah.
Like,
Does the Gulch have pine trees? Am I remembering that right? Is that where they are?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow.
But if we're going to be taking those into consideration, how many fucking gulches are there in some rural suburban areas? Like, gulches are like prevalent. I'm here in Indiana. Yeah. There's no gulch.
Yeah.
No, this was like, I was like, is this the town from Parasite where it rains on the rich and the poor people get flooded? Yeah. I was like, this town has bad geography for the Lone Pine Mall or whatever.
So the only thing that we haven't covered is the end, which I thought was very appropriate. I thought the destruction of it was great. Of the DeLorean was great. I did get like choked up because I was like, oh my God, that DeLorean has been with us for but in real life it's only existed
2
for
days.
like 48 hours. But for them it was like days or weeks and months. But and then seeing Jules and Verne and everybody, and and it kind of gave us that final Back to the Future moment where the train goes right
like one of the all-time coolest ships ever made ever.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that was the thing. Like, the moment of the DeLorean being smashed is rough. Marty coming back and walking through the wreckage. He sees this destroyed flux capacitor and everything else. And he's just like, he's really gone, man. Like, that was because this is the one where you started feeling those things, right? Where you're like, oh, man, all right. And when Doc came back and he just has, like, this weirdly optimistic note, which we haven't seen, where he's just, the future isn't written, so make it a good one. And you see this happy guy just going off, right? Where he's like, I've already been here, there, wherever. Like, I'm just loving life, right? And he gives Marty a chance to do that again, and we've seen Marty avoid the crash. I thought it was really great, man. Because I think it's weird that people wanted it to go out on a downer note, it felt like. Where, like, Doc is trapped, and he doesn't have the cool train and the family, and he's, like, jumping time. To me, I was like, this is, like, awesome. Like, that's the awesome way you want it. Like, this is not the series where I want to see Doc and Marty get their comeuppance, right? Like, I like these guys. I wanted them to be happy, and Doc being happy, I think, is kind of, because who saw that ending coming? Who saw Doc ending the series, right? When we first see Doc, who thought his last moment would be happily with his beautiful wife and family, traveling time and space and just truly enjoying the fruits of all of his labor to be super smart.
And let me throw out a hypothetical. Marty ends up being a multimillionaire, and the reason why is because, number one, he knows all the investments for the future. He knows what has survived,
the jackets,
and what you need to put money
he knows
into.
The hoverboard,
and he went and took every single cent that he had in 2019 and put it on the Cubs at the beginning of the season to win the World Series.
Oh,
and that
man.
dude cash. Oh, I'm sorry, I said
2015 in the movie, yeah.
2015, and put it on the Cubs, and he just went to the bank, man. He cashed out.
Yeah, he doesn't need an almanac. You just need to know that.
Yeah, that's kind of a time travel cheat, really? Right? If you just read the almanac and don't bring it back, you're still, if your memory's strong, you're still all right.
You just,
I just thought it was great, man. Like, this is again, I think that's the good thing Back to the Future does, is by the end of this, you're not supposed to sit and ponder all the scientific ramifications. You get one more great scene with these two guys, and that's all the movie is. I do wonder if there's another universe where Doc just floats off with Clara. We never see them again, and Marty just finds that picture somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? And that still is enough for him. I don't know. Because Doc floating off with Clara to me was one of the ultimate movie moments in the series.
Yeah, I wouldn't have seen that as like a downer if Doc had stayed in the Old West and was just happy and lived his life out. Like, that would have been a downer.
I think what they're afraid of is that then you open up even more of this paradox shit. But right? By saying Doc has removed himself from all timelines while also inserting himself into all timelines.
He's creating
that's easier
paradoxes now.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
Do that again, like, yeah, you're right though. I mean, as far as like a feel, a tone, a note, yeah, it's a totally appropriate ending. Like, it's a fun series, it's a fun ending, and if you don't overthink it, it's great.
Yeah, and it leaves your heart soaring where you want to do it again.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you keep.
The worst thing a trilogy can do is like when The Matrix ended, and I just went, "Fuck!" Right? Like, oh, they're telling us that Neo is just like a Windows program, like an operating system, and we have to re-add it every 2 years. And like, fuck! Right? Like, this one made me want to come back to the future. See what I did? All right, so we got to do it as we wrap out this all-time amazing series. So I think the list of best trilogies is pretty small, right? Like I said, I think The Matrix is an immediate disqualification because whatever part 3 was was a struggle, right? I think if you're talking original IP trilogies, it really is only this, Indiana Jones, and Star Wars, right? Those are like the big 3 original. But Star Wars now is like 9 fucking movies.
Yeah, and well, I mean,
that's not original IP though.
No, it was. George Lucas created that from scratch.
Oh, I thought it was based on a book.
Japanese thing, wasn't it?
Well, he essentially made a version of Hidden Fortress, but no, he made an original IP.
Okay.
But so, I mean, but that has gone on to be like a big series, right?
Right.
But, so let's just take Star Wars out, right?
Yeah,
I know people will be mad about that. Fine. But what are the big trilogy? I mean, this, Indiana Jones.
Alien.
But Alien is also 5, 6, 7 movies
Alien
now.
3, Alien 3 is garbage. That doesn't even count.
How dare... I'm actually a huge Alien 3 defender.
No, I love Alien 3.
The only thing I hate about Alien 3 is that Ripley settles for Tywin Lannister as the guy we're going to see her fuck in the movie instead of Hicks.
So I'll throw my two to you guys. It's the Toy Story trilogy and the Bourne Identities, the Bourne movies.
Wait, is Toy Story 4 now? Does Toy Story have 4 now?
Or it's hard to like
It
make
does,
trilogy.
but
If you capped it, Toy Story 3 is probably the best third movie of any trilogy.
Right.
Like Star Wars 3 or Toy Story 3 becomes so weirdly profound.
Yeah.
Well,
Right? Like
I
they
mean,
redid it.
Ironically, you could throw the Dollars trilogy on there. Fistful of Dollars,
Oh yeah.
for a few dollars more in the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
That's right.
So, those are original.
I know
IPs
people will say a lot of people say Godfather, but Godfather 3 was a big fucking step down to me.
Yeah, Godfather 3 was terrible. It's like considered one of the worst movies of all time, isn't it?
No, I mean it's not as bad as people remember, but it's definitely like, how did this slide in here?
Yeah.
What I love about the Back to the Future series, because like Indiana Jones is 3 different movies that could all play on their own. Also, that then got a 4th. The thing about Back to the Future, it was a book. Right? I'm trying to think if we just do like non-original trilogies. I don't even know what the fuck's out there except for The Matrix, which sucks.
Evil Dead 2, and the Dark.
And see, what I like about Back to the Future, though, I think gives it a little extra trilogy cred, is how it so perfectly blends and melds to where they're all so important to every movie. Everything we see throughout is wildly important to every step we take. So, I mean, really, to me, it's Evil Dead, this, and like the original 3 Star Wars trilogy had they just stopped there. I mean, I think those are the 3 that are so head and shoulders above. Because Indiana Jones is essentially just 3 serialized movies that don't really matter as a connected journey. And to me, that's a negative.
So,
I mean, I'm okay with it, but like this one is kind of unique. Back to the Future, it's literally, I mean, like Alien, I think kind of does that too, where it's literally a continuous story from start to finish. Like
Alien does do that.
It's basically like a Netflix series almost. Like it could be easily be broken down into like half-hour episodes for like a 10-episode season, and you'd have the same thing. Like it's just like one big long continuous story, and I love that actually about this trilogy. I mean, Alien is kind of like that, but I don't know of any other trilogy that has that same model.
Just directly run. I mean, Star Wars is directly running like that.
That's kind of true, but there's like years of breaks between those movies. Like,
I get what you're saying. Like, this is like, I mean, they redo the ending of every movie at the start of the next movie. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the only one that does that.
I mean, if you do that more, I love that.
If you guys want to get super depressing, we could do the before sunrise, before sunset, and after sunset movies.
Wildly beloved.
Familiar with those?
Yeah, every single one of them delivers what their audience wants.
Yeah, it's pretty.
It's not. I mean, I would say they're not necessarily my flavor of movie, but I get why they're beloved, and I do think it's a cool idea to just see these 2 human people have just a very normal human interaction and moment. And then just check in on them every couple decades. Like, that's a pretty cool idea for a movie series. Like, watching the actors actually age and their relationship have to react to that. It's kind of like a much better version of Boyhood to me, those 3 movies. Like, I'm into that. I think that's a good one. I never would have added that to the list, but I think it absolutely must be added to the best trilogies list.
Do any of the Die Hards count that we're thinking about? Die Hard, Die Hard 2, Die Hard 3.
Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Yep.
I love the Die Hard. I even like Die Hard 2, which I heard is the one that everyone hates.
No, that was fun.
I think Die Hard's really fun.
Yeah.
I think Die Hard also suffers from the other movies don't necessarily matter to what we see in each one.
So one of the things I really like that you guys keep pointing out is that every movie is tied into one another. Like The Die Hard 1 is a standalone compared to Die Hard 3, aside from the fact that they're brothers that are, but that you could totally remove that part of it. That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I like again, I'm throwing these out there not because of the fact that I actually think that they're better than Back to the Future, but something that we have to go and think about. Honestly, I'm sticking with like Indiana Jones still gives me the most joy out of probably all of these. I'm a really big fan of the Toy Stories. But yeah, man, Back to the Future really holds. It's a top spot. It's a top fiver for sure, if not a top 3 for me.
Yeah, I mean I'm trying to think of what. I mean, God, it would be really hard to say that. I mean, fuck. I honestly think Back to the Future is probably the best of the trilogies to me.
Of trilogy.
Because now because again. When I was a kid, it would have been Star Wars, but Star Wars is so much more now. It's hard to take it. Like, it's inevitable. I watched the prequels, and that has to affect the originals to me. And I hate that, right? It's like when I watch the other two Matrix, that has to matter to the one I mean, maybe John Wick right now is a really popular one.
Oh, great one.
Like, those are great, and they do kind of pile on each other.
That is,
what?
The thing with John Wick, though, is that they don't get me in the heart. I just watch that, and it's like I have like a manly rush. I'm like, this is awesome. But after the first one with the dog and the wife, you're like, I don't think I feel an emotion for 2 other movies.
I really do disqualify Star Wars because that's such an enormous universe.
It's huge
like I
now.
can't.
It's
like
huge.
I can't even think because now we've got Rogue One and Solo and all this other stuff, and it's like I can't.
And all the animated stuff. Like,
it's so enormous. It's so enormous that you almost have to disqualify. But man, great call with the John Wicks because that is one centralized story. They all back each other up. We're gonna get a 4th.
Oh, dude, I just read one. What? Mad Max. Road Warrior, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, and Fury Road is the one they suggested. That's their trilogy.
Oh, I thought there was there should be Road Warrior, Mad Max 2, and then Mad Max 3 Beyond Thunderdome. Or there should.
But this one says if you just did Road Warrior, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, and Fury Road.
So they leave out the first one.
The first one's called Mad Max, right?
Right.
And then the second one's Road Warrior. Yeah, so take out Mad Max. Because they really did start the mythology in Road Warrior.
I mean, they escalated.
If you just did those 3, that has to be way up on the list.
I haven't watched Beyond Thunderdome in years.
See, that's my favorite one. I even like that more than Fury Road because it's just so...
What?
Again, Fury Road to me is just this amazing fucking spectacle, but there is essentially no story happening in Fury Road, right? Thunderdome takes me to this really weird city, and, like, you know, to me it's like, oh, we're the Bullet Farm guys. In Fury Road, I'm like, I guess that's cool. But actually going to the town and seeing Tina Turner and Master Blaster and Thunderdome, that's cool to me, right? The Caveman Kid, that's cool. Like, that's world building to me that I appreciate.
Shenanigans.
I know. I probably just got a lot of shit for that one, but I'm here to be a stan. I like Thunderdome better than Fury Road, and I think it's going to be a very small amount of us.
Have you done a series on this yet?
No.
No. I think that's something we need to do.
I mean, someday I'd like to do that. Yeah. Let's see what else they have. The Dark Knight trilogy.
Okay.
That's an immediate disqualification from Dark Knight Rises is one of the worst films I've ever seen in my life.
I don't know if I go that hard.
Ooh, the Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead. That would be high on my personal because I really like all 3 of those.
You're talking like the 70s, 80s version.
The Romero ones.
Yeah.
Each one uniquely original. They are kind of all standalone, so that's a knock. I mean, Lord of the Rings, yeah, all right.
But that's original.
But no,
see this? Okay, so this list I'm looking at has Fistful of Dollars, which Kevin said, right? That's number 5. Back to the Future 4, or Back to the Future is number 4. Toy Story 3, Star Wars 2. This has Before Sunrise, number 1, the Before series.
Wow.
There you go, man.
Wow, good pull, Kevin.
They probably gave it a lot of credit just because. People love to go and pull out one that they're like, no one's thought about this, and now you can't argue it because it's like, yeah, it's good, you asshole, and I didn't even think about it.
They've been good for a long time, and I would argue that's exactly what those audiences want from those movies. It's unique in cinema. I mean, I think it's not for me, but But I think to take it out of the top 10 trilogies is obscene.
Yeah,
right? And we're kind of artificially removing Star Wars, right? So for me, it would be Evil Dead, the Mad Max trilogy. Back to the Future is still number 1.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are kind of like, I mean, Toy Story'd have to be top 5, even though Toy Story 2 is pretty garbage.
What?
Yeah, I mean, go back. I have kids, so I've rewatched it. Toy Story 2 has no value to the kind of good message of that series. It's just, well, Andy doesn't like me and some fat guy stole me. Wah, wah. There's really nothing interesting that happens in Toy Story 2, except for that he goes to a white-topia. He's like, now I'm around other white 50s toys. Maybe this will be great.
I didn't think that we were going to have to go and open up this can of worms. Did you want to talk for another hour? Because
No.
I'm really digging
I'm not here to start.
Toy Story
I'm not here to
trilogy.
start throwing bombs. I'm just saying Toy Story 2 sucks compared to the other two. The first
All
one's
right.
an all-timer, and Toy Story 3 is probably the best third movie of any trilogy, unless you count Fury Road, which is better than Toy Story 3.
Okay.
So I don't know. You got some interesting contenders. Like they listed the Terminator series. Terminator 3 is filth.
Yep.
Absolute. I like Aliens 3, so that would be in mine. That would make my top 5 for sure.
And
The zombies. The Night of the Living Dead series would be in my top 5.
I don't hate Aliens 3. I hate Aliens Resurrected. I think that's stupid.
Yeah.
And then
I have a theory though, is that if you take out the basketball, I think Alien Resurrection is equally as loved as Alien 3.
The sins of most of these that we're talking about is that they kept going, and that's the issue.
That's true.
Now we can't take it into a trilogy conversation because the 4th, 5th, 6th iteration was just so stupid that I don't like it anymore. You almost have to really love the fact. I bet the whole Before series is beloved because they wrapped it up, much like Back to the Future, right?
Yeah.
And
in a wildly satisfactory way. Like that's also why you would say that Toy Story gets in. You know, part 2 is a step down. Audience probably got what they wanted, but Toy Story 3 becomes maybe the most memorably, emotionally satisfying third movie of a series. So that has to like that's a really hard thing to, because I think it's inarguable Back to the Future 3 is the least good of those movies.
But then
it's still wildly satisfying.
Then do we fault Toy Story for having Toy Story 4?
I mean, to me, it's like once you have a 4, you come out of the list. But I mean, if you don't add those, it's a very small conversation. Right? Because Mad Max has 4, right?
To the first 3 of the movies.
Yeah. Even the Night of the Living Dead, like Romero is pretty much done after Day of the Dead, but then he started making other movies, like the Crazy Land of the Dead with like Dennis Hopper and the Crazy City.
Yeah.
See,
I think that's the problem. That's what I'm telling people though. Prepare yourselves. There is a world, the world we live in, where we will get another Back to the Future movie someday. It's going to happen because things that are so good and so beloved cannot be left alone.
Yeah,
it's going to fucking happen.
It's going to be Crystal Skull all over again, and I'm just going to hate everybody.
Yeah, I mean, and we're getting another Indiana Jones movie to be. I mean, this is the problem is when that's why I think Back to the Future stands alone in such a regard is that they did it. They fucking landed it.
Yeah.
They got out and left it this amazing thing that we can always go back to and not feel hurt, like sometimes Star Wars, like sometimes Terminator, Matrix, right? Like so many of these, that's the sin. Is you're like, why did you keep doing this to me? Like Predator. Predator made 2 awesome movies and they were done. Next time we saw him was Alien versus Predator, and you're like, well, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that to me? And that's the problem. That's why I think Back to the Future, I think you have to say it's the best trilogy of all time. Again, no pun intended.
All movies were great. It wrapped up well. Original IP. It's checking a lot of boxes, man.
Yeah. And you get your most emotional fulfillment from the third movie, I think you could argue. That's a pretty amazing feat to pull off, right?
You bet.
Right. Like, one thing that like I value in movies is like they're ones that like create like moments for like friends and family. Like Back to the Future was something I grew up on watching with my family repeatedly. And I just introduced it to my kid and he fucking loved it.
Yep.
Like this is like a family like tie-in movie. Like to me, like that sends it like that gives it huge bonus points and probably does make it my favorite trilogy.
Yeah, I mean but that's what the movie itself becomes, a time traveler. Like, I will share it with my kids, and I'm assuming my kids will share it with their kids. I can't imagine a world in which people don't enjoy watching Back to the Future. Like, I find that really hard to fathom.
You guys watch that with your kids, and I'll watch Before Sunrise. I get it.
There you go. With Petey.
Yeah.
Watch it with your nieces, man.
That's true.
Yeah, they'll love it.
Oh, they will. I mean, I don't know. I want to thank you, Kevin. This was your idea. This was an absolute amazing time going back into these movies. I'm glad they finally exist in the Film Alchemist archives now, and it was a great addition to Fan Choose Month. Kevin, Mike, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us, man.
Always a pleasure, my friend. I wish I could go back in time and do this all over again.
Or will we? Maybe when I turn this off, you're going to come running into my house. Griffey, the space-time continuum. That's actually my dream. I hope that happens. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for listening. That's it for Back to the Future. Fan Pick Month will continue, guys. Please take a second, leave us a rating and review, especially on Apple Podcast app. Email the show, Film Alchemist Pod. Find us on social media. Share us with your friends. And follow the YouTube channel and subscribe. Nerd Alchemist, plural, with an S at the end. Thank you guys so much for taking this trip through time with us. The future's not written. Remember that.
Have a good one.